Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepytime Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering your daytime problems, the ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we go any further, I need to just have a little bit of a chat with you listeners. This is aimed mostly at people who have been with me for a while, but it may be of interest to new listeners too. If you find the show helpful and you're using it regularly to help you to get some sleep, and if you have the means and can provide a little bit of support, I'd like you to consider helping me to grow the show by supporting me on Patreon. Now, I got an Apple Podcast review from Amber Lily this week, and she made a comment in it. It was a positive review, so thank you very much for it. But it was a 4-star, and she made one comment which is very valid. Amber Lily said, my first time listening, and in a nutshell, I love the quality of his voice, but not the quality of the equipment. That being said, we all got to start somewhere, and I'll definitely continue to listen. So thank you, Amber Lily. I'm glad that the sound quality, which I know isn't fantastic and is something I've acknowledged before, isn't so off-putting. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for sticking around. The reason I bring this up now is, thanks to the people who've been backing me on Patreon, I've got a little bit of a down payment for a bit of an equipment upgrade. So the good news is by the end of the year, probably around the end of the year, I'm going to switch to slightly better microphones, so that's going to be a little bit less noisy and more pleasant to listen to. I'm waiting for Black Friday, hoping for a good sale on what I'm keeping my eye on, and then I will have that up and running by the end of December. But yeah, ultimately, I can do a little bit of an upgrade on the stuff I have. I'd like to be able to sort of not be out of pocket for the rest of the upgrade that I'm doing. And thanks to the supports that I have, except for the fact that I need to buy a microphone at the end of this month, I'm no longer out of pocket for the day-to-day monthly expenses of the show. So that is pretty fantastic, and I'm very grateful for the help that I'm getting from those listeners. And I would like to take it a little bit further. I would like to do some more upgrading, to spend some more time on the fun part rather than doing a lot of editing. And I would like to improve things so that I can reach more people. So now, if you do have even the smallest of means to support, if you have $1 of a month that you can spare, that will be helpful to me. You can sign up on the Patreon for $1 a month, and you get $1 a month, and you get some benefits. I release weekly catnap bonus episodes on Radio Public to try and encourage people to listen there. And thank you to those people who do listen there. It's very helpful as well. And I make those episodes available to all patrons. So even at $1 a month, you get an extra bonus episode every week. You will also get a shout out on the episodes, and you'll get listed on the website and the show notes in the thank you section. With your consent, I don't put people's names out on the internet without their permission, so you have to agree to it. But then if you want, that's up for you. Now, also, if you can spare as much as $5 a month, you get all those benefits. You get the catnap, you get the shout out, you get listed in the website and the show notes. Plus, you get special edits of every main episode. I release one without this whole promotional section, so you don't have to listen to me rattling the can at you. And there's also story-only edits, so that if you don't like or need the intro, then you can just skip it and listen to the story itself. And as a bonus to all new patrons, up until the end of November, I will send you a handwritten postcard in the mail. You sign up at the $5 level. So I sent out the October ones yesterday as I'm recording, so a little bit late. Sorry about that. I was hoping to get addresses back from some other people that I didn't. And then also, as another extra little bonus, I guess, when if I get up to $50 a month by the end of November, which is possible, although probably not likely, I would like to try though. If I can reach $50 by the end of November, I will do a bonus video episode. The video will be exclusive to all patrons, and the audio will be released as a bonus episode in January to everybody who subscribes to the show. But now, if you would like to provide some support, but you don't actually have the financial means to give me any actual money, there are a couple of options for you as well. You can sign up on my Audible trial at audibletrial.com/sleepytime and get yourself a free audiobook to keep, as well as a 30-day free trial of the Audible service, and give me a little bit of a kickback. And if you do that, please let me know. I'd like to give you a bit of a shout out there as well, and I don't get any kind of notifications for that, so please feel free. I also mentioned that if you listen to the show on Radio Public, specifically on the apps on either your iPhone or your Android phone, they play ads in between the episodes, and I get a little bit of something for that. And also on Radio Public, you get those catnap weekly bonus episodes, which are usually short, like 10, 15 minutes short stories to listen to. Last but absolutely not least, I would like to shout out the music that I play for this show. I think it's a big part of the show's identity, and I was very lucky to find it. It's Un Désert by Kumiku. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website and their show notes in their Patreon, in the show notes, because they're definitely worth everybody taking a look. That's enough of that. Let's get back to what you're here for. Thank you. So what exactly is Sleepytime Tales? What is it for? It seems a bit of a strange idea, doesn't it? Listening to a podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But the fact is, the lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this podcast is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find that you lie awake at night, can't get to sleep because your mind's spinning and your emotions in turmoil? The anxieties of 21st century life just keeping your eyes open? Or do you find that you wake up in the middle of the night at around 3 a.m. and find that you just can't go back to sleep? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Now, I've always struggled to sleep. Ever since I was a baby, I used to keep my parents awake for years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, it was still a struggle for me to sleep through pretty much up until my mid-30s. And it's just still a struggle to me now, to be honest, although it's a little bit easier for me. I've learned that sleep podcasts are a thing. I discovered that when I found out that droning male voices have a tendency to just work almost like a sedative and knock me right out. I used to lie in bed listening to podcasts, expecting to be up most of the night, and I'd wake up having missed everything that I was trying to listen to. I eventually discovered that doing that deliberately worked for me, and then I even discovered that there are podcasts out there basically designed to do the same thing. I eventually discovered that there are podcasts out there designed or intended for people to fall asleep while they're listening to it. And I realized that I've got a boring, droning male voice, so I thought I'd do my part to see if I can help and reach others. So, if this is your first time with us, I've got to let you know every episode basically starts with this really long intro. I aim for about 15 minutes in total, including my little promotional section, and it's there for a reason. The first thing is, if you're a new listener, I want to explain the structure to new listeners. And sort of why and how to engage with the show to help you to sleep. And for people who've been around for a while, it's a chance to just like put me in the background and drone on while they prepare themselves for sleep, and you as well, while you're listening to this, even as a new listener, to put me on in the background and just while you go about, brush your teeth, have a drink of water, make sure your room temperature is nice and comfortable. Slightly cooler environment actually helps you sleep very well, and then you can snuggle into your blankets. That's all very restful. And Because at the end of the day, this is all about creating a space, a common shared area for us all to help you to sleep. And as a new listener, you may not be sure how to engage with this. If you've made it this far, you're obviously curious and interested. Now, as I understand, there's basically two ways to really engage with the show. Me, when I listen to a podcast at night, I actually need something that I can listen to. Generally speaking, an interesting idea that is delivered in a boring way that keeps my attention, but not so strongly that I don't want to fall asleep. I don't want to miss out on whatever I'm listening to. And that's basically the central premise of this show. But now what a lot of people do and what works just as well is to really just put me on in the background and let me drone on and as like a white noise almost. Some people like sea noises or rainfall, and for some people, droning male voices work. So tonight's story, we're returning to I say we're returning to a show that's an episodic story, or rather a serial story that I'm doing. If you haven't listened to the earlier one, you're not missing out on much. The whole idea of these things as well is I don't want any anxiety about sleeping. The stories are not that interesting. If you really want to go back and listen, the previous Southcliffe Manor episodes are there and marked, but ideally, you're not even going to reach the end of the story anyway, so it really doesn't matter if you've heard previous ones or not. And there's nothing that really requires you to have listened to the previous one. So, yeah, tonight's story is what I joke as a Downton Abbey but more boring type story. It's about a family that bought an old manor house and took on its whole staff. And there's a very stuffy old butler who doesn't really approve of the new family, but everyone's good-hearted. And it's all very warm and friendly, I think. And I've heard from somebody recently who said that the previous episode was the show where he made it like 3 minutes into the story and fell asleep, when normally it takes like 2 or 3 episodes to listen to. So hopefully that works that well for more people too. So now, obviously, as I said, I'm hoping that you're asleep before we get to the end of the episode. But it's very important that you don't feel pressurized. Don't force it. If this is your first night here with me trying out Sleepy Time Tales, the odds are pretty good it's not going to work for you. It takes a while to create new habits, and sleep and insomnia are habits in a way, and it may take 2 or 3 or maybe a couple more days to create that sort of sleep habit of sleep, the association with hearing my voice and falling asleep. So, and there may be things that keep you awake. Maybe this idea is quite strange and you've got to get over that. Maybe my voice is strange. I've got a bit of an odd accent. It's a very specific regional South African accent. That isn't actually all that widespread even in popular media of South Africa. If you ever hear a South African on a TV show or something, they're usually a Afrikaans mercenary. And also that other listener that I mentioned as well, who usually listens to 2 or 3 episodes. Sometimes 1 episode isn't enough. Maybe you just need a little bit longer. But whatever you do, just relax and lean into it. Don't fight. Don't force. Don't even force yourself to try to sleep. Just lie there and live in the moment. So queue up a few episodes or run through the backlog. I'm actually someone, what I do with the sleep podcast is they actually knock me out quite quickly, but I wake up in the night. So I usually have a whole long playlist running, and I will wake up. Usually my earbuds have fallen out, I pop them back in and I'll go back to sleep. I do that at 3 a.m. when I wake up, and sometimes I even wake up like 30 to 60 minutes before my alarm goes off. And I do the same thing. Even if it's right before my alarm, sometimes that last little 30 or 60 minutes of sleep is just the most blissful, pleasant part of my night. Just allowing complete relaxation right before your alarm goes off it seems deeply satisfying. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark. And while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you to relax. to improve your life in a small way. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes life harder. So I'm here to do a small part to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope. Also, I always sort of appeal to kindness here. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. And what is very important, and it's rare in this day and age, especially for us insomniacs, I need you to be kind to yourself. We've all been there where we can't fall asleep and we get so frustrated and angry with ourselves. And don't do that. Don't beat yourself up. Don't rebuke yourself. Don't get tense if you can't get over the edge of sleep. Even with me here trying to help. Frustration is one of the greatest enemies of a good night's sleep. And the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and just drift into the dark. So take a breath, forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep feels something like an enemy, but it is not your enemy. It is a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life and supposed progress that shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Southcliffe Manor, Episode 2, The Driving Lesson. Mr. Garvey sniffed disapprovingly. He spent quite a lot of time disapproving some of the activities and choices of the new family for which he worked. He would never have said anything openly. He was, after all, in service, and he was very professional, and he did like and respect the Harper family. He particularly appreciated the fact that when they bought the house, they employed all the staff that came along with it, which was very much not required. But he was still old-fashioned, and a little bit of a classist snob, despite the fact he was a working man. But he was a little bit old-fashioned, and, to be honest, a bit of a classist snob, despite the fact that he was a working man. So, some of the more modern city life proclivities of the Harpers still didn't sit with him very comfortably. Now, one of the staff members that came along with Southcliffe Manor was the young chauffeur. The chauffeur's name was Chester Richards. He was a second-generation chauffeur at Southcliffe Manor. His father, Franklin, had been the chauffeur for the original Lord and Lady, the Earl and his wife. And young Chester had grown up fascinated with cars, and he'd grown up among the other staff, and it had been a natural procession for him to continue in his father's footsteps. Chester was an extremely capable young driver. He had had a lot of advanced training. The Southcliffes were a little bit paranoid about things towards the end of their lives, as it seems to be the way with people when they feel their fortunes slipping away. So when they traveled the world, they were concerned about things like getting kidnapped and stuff like that. So young Chester had received evasive driving technique lessons and all sorts of stuff, and he had regular refreshers every few years. The Southcliffe family had spent a lot of time traveling in Central and South America, and there's a reputation that Mexico has a fondness, or organized criminals rather from Mexico have a fondness for kidnapping the wealthy and ransoming them off. And of course, as the Southcliffe's fortunes dwindled, they weren't sure they would be able to meet any sort of ransoms. So young Chester did his part, along with a bodyguard who didn't work for the house. He worked for the Southcliffes personally, and so moved on when they moved on. Was a central part of their journeys. Now, Mr. Garvey was not a traveller. He had gone to Europe, but he had never gone on any of the American trips. There was a valet, Lucas Bradley, who took care of the lord of the house when he travelled. Lucas had resigned when he moved on. He actually stuck with the Southcliffes. He left the household and stuck with the family. When I say the Southcliffes ran out of money, they just ran out of money for this particular house. They still had a couple. They had a house in London, they had a house or two in Europe, and they had their house in Mexico. So they got rid of the old manor because it was very expensive to run. They weren't actually poor. They were just like not that rich anymore. So they still had their own personal staffs, which included Lucas. When the family traveled to Central America, South America, Europe, or Asia, Garvey stayed behind and he rallied the house staff to do some major cleaning and major repair work at those periods. The Southcliffes would come back and find their house spick and span and refreshed and looking even better than when they had left. And Garvey always ran a perfect house, so that it looked perfect when they left. But now, why is Garvey upset about young Chester? What has he done? Well, Chester was not the responsible person. He's not the one who made Mr. Garvey upset. What has upset Mr. Garvey is that the new lady of the house, Evangeline Harper, had decided to learn to drive. She was a city girl at heart. She grew up in many major cities that had very good, high-quality public transport, and she had never needed to drive. She had never learned. Even when not using public transport in the last few years, things like Uber and Lyft have become a global feature. So again, she had no reason to learn to take the wheel herself, and she just had never learned. It had never been a major problem in her life. It hadn't been a factor at all, in fact. But now she lived in a rickety old manor, although fair enough, surrounded by people, but she felt rather isolated that she couldn't get to and fro as she wished. Now Chester was pretty much always there and always available to take her for a drive if she wanted, but she wanted to be able to just jump in the car and go to town herself, drive down to the local town of Rose-on-the-Water, or take a longer trip to a nearby city if the mood took her. She'd always been someone who liked to wander and explore, and having to take along a staff to do it made her feel a little bit like Livingston, but not in a good way. She didn't want to have to take a porter and a maid and this and that on the way to town. So she wanted to learn to drive so she could just do it on her own. And young Chester, being an accommodating young man and a very capable driver, decided that he'd agreed that he was very happy to help her to learn to drive. And so this was the reason for Garvey's disapproving sniff. Most of the noble family that he had worked for over the years, none of them had learned to drive. Only one of the Southcliffe sons had actually learned to do that himself. When he had gone off to do military service, he had come back able to drive, although he still didn't particularly like it. The rest of the family were very happy to wait around for the chauffeur to take them as required. But the Harpers were not like that. Julian drove himself backwards and forwards whenever he needed to, and Evangeline had been riding with young Chester, but she really just wanted to be able to do something herself. She often said that she didn't feel like she should bother him to go on a minor shopping trip, but of course it was his job. It wasn't to bother. He was perfectly happy. But if she wanted to pop out and go buy something small in town, even if it was just more for the experience of going out rather than actually buying something, she didn't want to have to take him with. There were three cars at Southcliffe. There was an old Land Rover that had actually been in the family for a long time. It had been the groundskeeper's, the groundskeeper usually used it. And there was a Rolls Royce, quite an old one, not as fancy as it sounds. That was the general family car that Chester drove the family in. And there was also a mid-sized Jaguar. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. The Harper family and the Southcliffes before them liked to make the appearance of buying British, even though neither of those vehicles is actually British anymore. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a British car company anymore. Pretty much everything with a British label is owned by somebody else. So Chester had taken Evangeline out in the Land Rover. He had chosen that because it wasn't the easiest car in the world to drive and was fairly slow. It was a little bit tricky to handle the controls and it was quite heavy. And they didn't really have much in the way of decent roads, so it was a good one for driving around fields and farm roads rather than a parking lot, like where the other cars may have been more suitable. The Rolls Royce probably would never have been suitable for learning to drive. So Chester had taken Evangeline out in a field in the Land Rover. The field was quite near to the house. And, well, as I said, the car is not the easiest car in the world to drive, but Chester was an excellent teacher. He had an unflappable personality, and he was very kind and patient and friendly. I have to tell you, with his manners, he was very popular with all the ladies and among the household staff. But he was always very professional with them. In fact, he had a girlfriend in town, so there was no inappropriate behavior at work. Julian had gone down to watch the driving lesson. He was a little bit curious. Evangeline was not the calmest of people. She sometimes gets a little bit excited. And he wanted to see how the lesson would go. He thought it would be maybe quite funny because he could tease her about getting tense. But Chester, in his excellence, made sure that she was calm pretty much the entire lesson. And there was actually very little excitement and very little challenge. So Julian was both proud of his wife and happy with Chester's work, and, to be honest, a little bit disappointed because he and his wife liked to tease each other a lot. He made a little bit of a video on his phone to show the children when they got home from school, but it was a pretty sedate process. The Land Rover was driving slowly because the field was smooth, but the grass was thick and soft. They were actually due to bring the sheep in quite soon because the grass was getting on the long side and they needed to get it a bit under control, but the sheep hadn't been rotated in yet. They were going to come in the following week. So the Land Rover drove around in figures of eights and circles and a little bit of a swaying backwards and forwards as Evangeline got used to the controls. And Julian had his phone out, so he started reading some news stories and seeing events that were going on in city in general and in the country more generally, and in his industry, in the music industry more specifically. He kept half an eye on what was going on in case anything too exciting, but overall his attention had pretty much wandered. He was a big fan of keeping up with events in the industry, even though he was semi-retired and but he was in the process of setting up his music studio at the manor and occasionally getting in some acts to come and do some recording. He was busy waiting for some of the contractors to come out to do the fitting out of the studio. There were a few clients waiting for him to do some work because Julian was a very good record producer, one of the best, and he was looking forward to working in a very quiet environment. Garvey came out to ask if Julian wanted some tea or coffee. It was late in the day, and Julian had a bit of a history, so he opted for a bit of a herbal tea. He didn't want to be kept up too late that night. He was adjusting quite nicely to the early day cycles of manor life. He would go out early in the morning and go on a tour of the grounds and look at some of the livestock and see the state of repair of the outbuildings and some of the other houses on the grounds. He was adjusting quite nicely to the lifestyle, although he was never quite going to be anything like a noble with a family history like the family that had been there before. as Garvey came out, Chester took Evangeline out of the field, drove out slowly, and went up the dirt road, up the hill, with a large rut in the middle, or a large hump in the middle, and she drove up the hill slowly and carefully. It was a little bit noisy. She seemed to be nervous to change gear, but Chester was making sure she was proceeding as vigorously as he could, and you could hear eventually the gear changes happened as she went up the hill. Now, Garvey appreciated the mostly modest lifestyle and choices of the Harper family. When he had heard that the house had been bought by a record producer and his family, he had feared the worst. There are many manor houses in the UK and Europe that have been used for recording. There's some very famous albums that have been recorded in manor houses. And Garvey obviously had heard horror stories about what these events were like. It was very common to hear about all sorts of nonsense taking place, drug-fueled parties and alcohol and damage to the properties. But the Harpers didn't seem like the sort of people that would have that sort of thing happening in their house. Evangeline was a no-nonsense person, and Julian, well, he has a history, honestly, of a misspent youth. And he didn't touch alcohol or any narcotics anymore, really. He had left all that behind him, and he was having a very stable and happy life. His children were very important to him, and his wife was very important to him, and he didn't do anything that was going to put them at risk. There was not going to be any wild partying and drug taking in the house while Benjamin and Cecily were around. Cecily was only 15 and possibly in a slightly easily influenced age, but the children had their heads screwed on very, very tight and very straight, and were also very well-behaved children. Garvey had also been concerned about that when he heard a record producer's kids were moving in. Now, Julian was completely well-behaved thanks to being in recovery after his wild youth. Evangeline did like the odd glass of wine, maybe a couple a month. Benjamin, as a young man, as an 18-year-old, he was in the stage of letting his hair down and doing some partying. His parents actually left him to it. They were very happy to allow him his space and allow him to have new experiences, and always provide a safe environment for him to come back to. So there was never any need for him to sneak around behind their backs. Cecily obviously was far too young for any of that, although she did have the odd glass of sherry or port at dinner time. But that was also part of the family's belief that you don't forbid things to children because it makes them far too curious. The sound of the Land Rover's engine came from the distance. It was a very old Land Rover with a very old diesel engine, and it sounded almost like a tractor. The sound echoing through the small hills around the manor house. Well, when Garvey brought out the herbal tea for Julian, he hung around to keep an eye, see if his boss wanted to anything more. And Julian absentmindedly called Garvey's attention to a story in the newspaper and asked him about his opinion about it. Garvey realized afterwards that he didn't even hesitate to answer. He didn't hesitate to give an honest opinion about something that he wouldn't have even been asked by Earl Southcliffe earlier. And he only realized later that he would never have even dreamed of giving any answer actually to Southcliffe's. But the Harpers were very different kinds of people. Julian, while the query was wasn't exactly anything overly controversial, there was a strong sense in the conversation that Julian really did value Garvey's opinion. Garvey was... Now, noble families, and the Southcliffes in particular, they were always very pleasant to their staff. They treated them well, and they were kind to them. But there was always just that little bit of barrier, a little bit of almost like even at the warmest, there was a sheet of glass in between the people that would stop them from becoming over-familiar. Now, while there was still a barrier here between Julian and Garvey, and there was no sense of a risk of over-familiarity, it had been the first time that Garvey recalled ever actually being asked an honest opinion about something, and that he had provided it without even thinking about what someone would think, without considering the possibility that maybe he would need to moderate his responses. There was probably thanks to Julian's more working class background, there was a genuineness and a warmth and a easy accessibility with the conversation that they had. Can't even tell you what it was that they talked about. It was just some random news story. Probably something about interest rates or something of the like. Something that's generally fairly uncontroversial and not going to cause fights. No one's really going to get that upset over a couple of 1 or 2% interest rates at the government level. But it's still something people will have an opinion on. But again, Garvey just felt like a genuine person to Julian Harper, in a way that, while he had always been treated well by the Southcliffes, was just different. Garvey largely lived for his work. He did have friends, but he lived at his work, and in his position, there was very seldom chance to have a chat. There were the people he worked for and the people who worked for him. The only person in the house who was pretty much his equal, sort of authority-wise, was Mrs. Fitz, the head housekeeper. So they got on very well, but after 20 years working together, there was not much in the way of conversation left to be had. So Garvey never really had much of a chat with people. It was quite unusual for him to just talk about nothing in particular with somebody without giving an instruction or getting an instruction. Again, as the sound of the tractor echoed over them, they just had a 30-minute conversation about everything and nothing, the way people do when they're sitting reading a newspaper and ask each other's opinions for it. Garvey was a lifetime bachelor, but he did have 2 nieces he adored, his sister's children. He told Julian Harper about them, about how much he loved his extended family, the joy those young girls brought to him. He didn't know if the Southcliffes even knew he had nieces. So he was really in a new place here. He reflected afterwards that maybe he felt a little bit uncomfortable with it, that there was this lack of boundaries between him and the family. But overall, he really just did appreciate the fact that they were friendly, not familiar, just warm and inviting, and treated everybody exactly as equals. Or not quite exactly as equals, because that would be familiarity, but suitably, as close to equals as they could, considering their employer-employee relationships. The sound of the Land Rover grew louder and crested back over the hills it came. Julian and Garvey both glanced up because it seemed a little bit on the loud side, and it came over the top of the hill a little bit too fast. It seemed in a way to get slightly light on its wheels and settle down quite heavily on the other side. Largely without drama, but it did skid to a stop coming down. I think Evangeline had been accelerating up the hill as you're supposed to, but hadn't come off the accelerator quite fast enough at the top, and so she had given herself a bit of a fright. The Land Rover continued to proceed down the hill and pulled up next to where Garvey and Julian were sitting, and Evangeline got out laughing her head off. "Did you see what happened there? I was going so fast over the hill," she said. Got a little bit of a fright, but all under control. Chester got out the other side of the car with a small smile on his face. He looked delighted at how things had been going. Evangeline seemed to be doing pretty well with the driving lesson. And he said so. He said she was showing a lot of promise and a lot of growth, and he was impressed with how well she did. He also did have a bit of a giggle when they mentioned how fast they'd come up over the hill and the fright that she'd gotten when they landed. But again, extremely professional. He didn't make a big deal about it. Julian gave Evangeline a big hug and told her he was proud of her. He was very happy she was learning to drive, so he believed it was quite important that she had the ability to be independent as possible. So he was supporting this whole process as much as he was hoping there was something he could tease her about. He did say he was sorry he didn't get a video of her coming up over the hill and nearly crashing. Well, it wasn't nearly a crash, it was very far from it, because the kids would have loved to have watched that. So Julian stood up and Evangeline walked over, and they all picked up a few odds and ends to walk into the house. Garvey stopped for a second. He wasn't used to people picking up after themselves. Trey was still there, but as well, he was the one with the steadiest hands, so he would pick it up and carry it in. But a lot of the stuff that had been brought out earlier, Evangeline and Julian and even Chester picked up and carried into the house. And they all went inside. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website and their Patreon, which you will find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.